I spent the best years of my youth standing beside Gavin Kane. I drew his future with my own hands. Every curve, every angle, every hidden mark that only the two of us understood. I even designed a ring once, naive enough to believe it would end up on my own left hand one day. Instead, it glittered on the finger of another woman. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't ask why. I just opened my laptop, found every file tagged with our private little code, and deleted it all one folder after another until the projects that had swallowed 5 years of my life vanished like they'd never existed. Then I filled out a resignation form and sent it straight to HR. The whole company exploded like it had just watched a celebrity scandal unfold in real time. In the internal group chat, rumors ricocheted like bullets. She quit? Please. She'll crawl back in a week. Without Mr. Kane, what is she? On the top floor, in the CEO's office, Gavin glanced at the resignation email on his phone and let a cold smile crease his mouth. Give it 7 days, he said lazily. She'll come back and beg. His assistant laughed along. Everyone did, because everyone believed it. But 1 week passed, and his inbox stayed empty. His screen never lit up with a message from that familiar number. By the 7th day, impatience finally cracked through his confidence like a hairline fracturing glass. He called me himself. My designs, he said, forcing his voice into calm control, as if control was something he could still afford. I already had IT restore them. Come back. The voice on the other end wasn't mine. It was a man's low, unhurried, the kind of voice that didn't need to raise itself to feel dangerous. Sorry, the stranger said, almost politely. Ivy's still asleep. Gavin went still. His next breath came out rough, like the room had suddenly lost oxygen. Put her on. No need. The man's tone remained gentle, but the pressure behind it was invisible and absolute. Mr. Kane, she's my woman. Don't entertain fantasies that don't belong to you. Then, clean and decisive, he hung up. The dial tone cut through Gavin's arrogance like a blade. And if you want to know how that happened, it started on the last windy night of autumn. That night, the wind scraped along the glass walls of Kane Harbour Group's headquarters and pushed its cold straight into my bones. The city's lights glittered beneath the clouds like someone had spilled diamonds across the streets. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window with my newest drawings in my hands. A full 5-piece set, designed around a teardrop-cut diamond, accented with turquoise earrings, necklace, bracelet, a tie clip, and a pair of matching rings. 5 stones. 5 years. The curve of the band mimicked the rhythm of a heartbeat. And inside the ring, hidden where the world couldn't see, I'd engraved our initials, mine and his, like a private prayer. A 5-year anniversary gift. I checked my watch. 1 hour until the company's year-end gala. My heart was beating too fast for someone who claimed she didn't care anymore. My palms were damp. I smoothed the front of my beige blazer dress, took a deep breath, and walked toward Gavin's office. The door was slightly open. I slowed without meaning to, and then I heard him. What do you think of this designer's level, Miss Shaw? Gavin's voice, familiar, intimate, was also strangely cold, as if he were discussing a tool, not a person. And I knew, with a clarity that made my stomach drop, that he was talking about me. My hand froze in midair. A woman laughed softly from inside Lazy. Arrogant, as though the world had always made room for her. Decent, she said. She has a little talent. Then, like she was bored of being generous, she added, but once I officially join, she can just be my assistant. She doesn't have a background. Give her a title, so she doesn't look pathetic. That's all. Through the crack in the door, I saw a slender hand with glossy red nails lift a sheet of paper off Gavin's desk. My ring design. The same drawing I'd submitted that morning for review, the lines I'd revised for a week, the details I'd obsessed over until my eyes burned. In her hand, it looked like nothing. Just paper. Just ink. "You're right," Gavin murmured. He even smiled. The smile that once lit up my youth now looked like ice. "How long has she been with you?" the woman asked casually, as if asking how long he'd owned a watch. 5 years, Gavin answered, taking a slow sip of whiskey. "That's all. Give her something stable, and she'll be fine. That type doesn't cling for long." That type. Like I wasn't a person. Like I was a phase. My fingers trembled around the drawings in my hand. The hallway wind slid through the gap and stung my eyes until they burned. I stood there, silent and invisible, while the last 5 years of my life were reduced to a convenient line item. The year-end gala was bright enough to make it hard to breathe. Crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, dresses that shimmered like liquid starlight, laughter floating over the music, applause already preloaded into everyone's hands. The host's words washed over me like noise. I couldn't hear anything clearly. Not anymore. Gavin walked onto the stage like he belonged to the light. The follow spot pinned him perfectly, highlighting the straight line of his shoulders, the elegance everyone loved, the calm authority that made people worship him. "Tonight," he said, pausing at just the right moment, "I have an important announcement." His gaze swept the crowd and stopped not on me but on a woman in a deep moss-green gown standing a short distance away. "Kane Harbour Group will formally enter a comprehensive strategic partnership with Shaw Holdings." Applause. Gavin raised his glass, and his voice softened into something almost tender. "And I'm honoured to announce, Miss Serena Shaw will become Mrs. Kane." The room erupted. Serena stepped up beside him, smiling with graceful warmth, and accepted a velvet box from the host. She opened it to reveal a dark green tie clip. "This was rushed through a Paris artisan workshop," she said sweetly. "I thought it would suit you." My heart clenched so hard it hurt, because I knew that tie clip. I'd bought the emerald in London the year before. I'd cut it myself over a month. I'd carved the tiny crescent moon pattern inside with shaking patience. I still remembered Gavin lifting the stone to the light, leaning close enough that his breath touched my ear. "Beautiful," he'd murmured, "like your eyes." Now, under the screaming lights and the thunder of applause, he dipped his head so another woman could pin it to him, his expression gentle, as if the memories we'd built had never existed at all. "And this," Serena said, lifting her left hand. The diamond on her ring finger blazed so sharp it almost made me flinch. My design. The ring I'd adjusted at 2 a.m, night after night, until it felt like my pulse lived inside the gold. "I heard this is Ivy's signature piece," Serena said, turning toward the crowd with an innocent smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Gavin said it was perfect for our engagement." The room buzzed instantly. "They're perfect together. She's the top graduate from Brenton Royal College of Art, right?" This time Mr. Kane chose someone who matches him power and talent, not like some people. The chandeliers above me fractured into 1,000 shattered stars, and I realized something with terrifying calm. 5 years beside him had just been crushed into dust by applause. My phone vibrated. A message from HR. "Room 1601, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Please bring all design files for handover. You will transfer assistant duties to Miss Serena Shaw." I stared at the words until they blurred. At 3 a.m, the design floor was dark and silent, but the glow of my screen lit my face like a confession. I walked through the studio one last time, fingertips brushing each display case, my first earring design after joining the company, the necklace that had been honoured at Asia Jewellery Week, the bracelet that went viral because it looked like sunlight trapped in metal. Each piece had a small hidden mark, my mark tucked where ordinary eyes wouldn't look. But from now on, the world would only see the brand name, not me. I opened folder after folder, file after file. Delete, delete, delete. Each click felt like burying another year of youth with my own hands. When it was done, I felt strangely weightless. Not free, just empty enough to fly. At 9 sharp, I stood outside room 1601. Through the frosted glass, Serena sat with her legs crossed, flipping through my interview file like she already owned my past. Ivy, a familiar voice sounded behind me. Gavin. I turned, and without hesitation, placed my signed resignation form in his hand. Mr. Kane, I said calmly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. This is my resignation. He glanced down, brows tightening. You're really leaving? Leaving? To become her assistant? I let out a soft laugh, flat and almost polite. Do you truly believe I should be grateful for that honor? I turned toward the elevator. Behind me, someone asked nervously, Sir, are you really letting her go? Gavin's voice didn't change. Yeah. Not stopping her? 1 week, he said, careless as always. When she realizes she can't even survive as an assistant outside Kane Harbor Group, she'll come back. He didn't know that as the elevator doors slid shut, I'd already booked my flight. A dawn flight, direct to Paris. Paris in autumn looked like a dream painted in gold. Leaves scattered across the Champs, Élysée, mist clinging to the luxury storefronts, perfume drifting through the air like a secret you couldn't name. My best friend Mia took special leave to pick me up. She worked as a jewelry buyer at a luxury brand's headquarters and talked the entire drive like she was trying to glue my heart back together with words. Tonight there's a gathering, she said brightly. Old design school friends. You need fresh air. And also, she shot me a sly look in the rearview mirror. There might be someone interesting. I shook my head. The last thing I wanted was industry gossip, pitying looks, and congratulations about the engagement I'd just escaped from. But Mia didn't give me room to refuse. She dragged me straight into a private room at a Michelin star restaurant. The door opened, and I stopped. A man stood by the window with a glass of red wine, tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of silhouette that held attention without asking. Under warm lighting, his profile was sharp, high nose, clean jawline, eyes deep enough to make you forget your own thoughts. I recognized him before my mind caught up. Victor Hale, my former professor, the jewelry appraisal instructor from university. Professor Hale? Someone exclaimed as they entered behind me. You're here. We invited you to the exhibition last time, and you said you were too busy. I just finished a meeting downstairs, he said evenly, gaze moving over the group. I heard it was an alumni gathering. I came to take a look. 6 years. And he looked even more imposing than I remembered, taller than Gavin, standing among everyone else like the final line of a perfect sketch. His eyes swept the room and paused on me for a beat longer than polite. For a second, I was back in the classroom, ginkgo leaves whispering outside the window, sunlight on his fingers as he held a pen. His calm voice explaining the inner fire of a gemstone, the hidden flaws that only patience could find. Back then, he was 27. I was 21, and I sat in the front row, pretending my heart wasn't betraying me. Mia leaned close and whispered, He's the head judge for this year's Paris Jewelry Design Exhibition. Then she nudged my foot under the table and murmured, Ivy, do you think he came because of you? I looked away, forcing a small smile. Impossible. We haven't spoken since graduation. I didn't know that in the moment Victor Hale saw me standing frozen in that doorway. His gaze softened like someone had finally found a gemstone they'd once lost in dust. And I didn't know that later he would be the man who calmly answered Gavin Kane's call and said, without raising his voice, She's my woman, don't fantasize. The night blurred with clinking glasses and laughter that didn't reach me. Wine warmed my veins, dulled the sharp edges of memory. Mia watched me, then glanced at Victor, and her eyes sparked with mischief. "Professor Hale," she said loudly, smiling like a saint with a knife behind her back. "Could you take Ivy back to her hotel later? She's had a bit too much. I don't feel safe letting her go alone." I jolted upright. Victor looked at me for a few seconds, his gaze deepening, as if weighing something he'd held back for years. Then he nodded. "All right." Mia leaned close to my ear, wine-sweet breath warm against my cheek. "Listen, Gavin Kane dumped you for Serena Shaw, so you have every right to choose someone better. And a man like Victor Hale? If you don't try once, it's a waste." "Nonsense," I muttered, cheeks burning. "He was our professor." "Not anymore." Mia raised an eyebrow. "We graduated years ago. Trust me, I can tell. He wants you." Victor's Maybach stopped at my hotel. Paris night air slipped through the crack of the window, carrying perfume, rain, and something expensive and intangible that made my head feel light. I reached for the seatbelt. "Thank you, Professor." I meant to say, "Thank you." But the old title escaped out of habit. Victor turned his head toward me. Streetlights angled across his face, cutting his features into shadow and gold. His hands rested on the steering wheel, long fingers steady, knuckles defined. For a moment, the gala flashed through my mind, Gavin's cold smile, Serena's sweet cruelty, the applause grinding my youth into dust. Something fierce rose in my chest, reckless and bitter and alive. Without knowing where the courage came from, I heard myself ask, "Do you want to come up and see my new designs?" In the elevator, soft yellow light turned the space into a half-shadowed confession booth. Victor looked at me, eyes dark and deep as a buried memory. "Wine makes me brave," I said, laughing at myself, and I gripped the edge of his suit jacket like I couldn't afford retreat. He stilled. Then he lifted one arm and braced his hand against the wall beside my head, leaning in until I could hear my own heartbeat stumbling in my ribs. His cologne wrapped around me wood, smoke, and something classic that should have felt unfamiliar. Instead, it felt like shelter. He lowered his head. The kiss hit like a wave that had been held back too long, direct, unflinching, leaving no space for doubt. "There are cameras." I gasped, barely. His voice rasped, the restraint in it cracking. "I'm not your professor anymore." The hotel room door clicked open. His tailored jacket hit the floor in a careless fold, a perfect contradiction to the man who always looked controlled. He pressed me gently against the wall before I could reach for the light switch. Moonlight spilled in from the window, painting his shoulders in silver, shaping every line of his back like an artist's careful hand. And I remembered a charity design competition 6 years ago, 3 sleepless nights. A moonstone cut in a daring style, my hands shaking as I submitted it. That day, Victor's fingers traced the edge of my sketch with quiet focus. "This moonstone cut is fascinating," he'd said, warm but serious. I'd looked up and been caught by the softness in his eyes, then looked down too quickly, hiding the ridiculous little crush I'd never confessed to anyone. I never imagined there would come a night he would hold me like this, kiss me under the same kind of moonlight, and make my past feel like something I could finally survive. "Gentle," I whispered, gripping his shirt front, my voice shaking. Victor paused, forehead resting against my neck, breathing in like he was forcing himself to stay careful. Then his touch slowed. Patient, controlled, as if I was something fragile and rare, something worth reverence. Later, when the room settled into quiet, I noticed his cuff. A small moonstone button. My design. The one from that competition, the piece that had been auctioned off for charity and bought anonymously for an absurd price. My throat tightened. So it had been him. Victor followed my gaze, then turned his wrist slightly so the moonstone caught the moonlight fully. His finger brushed over its smooth surface, almost tender. My eyes stung. He didn't explain. He simply lowered his head and kissed the corner of my eye, catching the tears before they could fall like he'd done it 1,000 times. On my 5th day in Paris, my phone lit up with a message from Hazel Zhu, a former colleague at Cane Harbour Group. "Ivy, when are you coming back to Cloud City?" "Not for now," she typed fast. "Next week is Mr. Kane Sr.'s 80th birthday. You should at least say hello." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied, "Please wish him a happy birthday for me. I can't make it." Hazel sent another message. "He treated you well these past years. If you don't come, he'll be sad." I set my phone down and looked out the window. The sky over Paris after rain was deep blue, rooftops glittering with wet light. I typed, erased, typed again, then finally sent a short line. "I'll have a gift delivered, thank you." Back in Cloud City, inside a private clubroom washed in warm light, Hazel exhaled and slid her phone across the table to the man sitting opposite her. Gavin Kane held a cigarette between 2 fingers and tapped it against the rim of a glass, slow and rhythmic. Champagne trembled inside, reflecting the ceiling lights like trapped sparks. His eyes looked darker than Hazel had ever seen. "What did she say?" he asked. "She said she's not coming back," Hazel admitted, hesitating. "She only asked me to pass on birthday wishes." Gavin's jaw tightened just slightly, like someone had finally touched a nerve he thought didn't exist. And that was when Hazel, unable to stand the silence anymore, quietly said, "Then, why don't you call her yourself?" Gavin didn't answer right away. He only stared at the bubbles rising in his glass, as if watching them might tell him how something he'd assumed was owned could suddenly become untouchable. And in the distance, across an ocean, I sat in Paris, with moonlight on the floor, a man's cuff glinting like a promise, and the strangest thought in my chest. Maybe I didn't lose 5 years. Maybe I finally got them back. Victor pushed his chair back with a soft scrape against the floor. The sound wasn't loud, but it landed like a gavel. The little Chinese restaurant suddenly felt too small for the air between us. The ginger steam rose from my bowl. White pepper bit gently at the back of my throat. The warm, familiar smell that had just comforted me a moment ago now made my eyes sting, because warmth had become something I didn't know how to accept without paying for it later. Victor stood in front of me, adjusting his cuff, as if we'd just finished discussing a contract, not a heart. His jaw was tight. The kind of tight that wasn't anger, but restraint. "Victor," I called, the name leaving my mouth lighter than it should have, like a plea I didn't have the right to make. He looked down at me. His eyes were calm, but the calm was brittle, a thin layer of ice over deep water. "I'm going to take a walk," he said softly. "Finish your soup." Then he turned and walked out. The bell above the door rang once. A clean, crisp sound. And then he was gone. I stayed where I was, chopsticks hovering over the bowl, staring at the little circles of mushroom turning slowly in the broth, like they were trying to hypnotize me into not feeling anything. It wasn't that I didn't want him. It was that I didn't trust myself not to ruin him. 5 years with Gavin Kane had trained my instincts like a dog on a leash. Love meant shrinking. Love meant adjusting your taste, your materials, your dreams, until they fit someone else's brand. Love meant being told, again and again, that if you were smart, you'd accept what you were given. So when Victor offered me something that felt steady, something that didn't demand I erase myself to earn it, my first instinct wasn't gratitude. It was fear. Because people don't offer you that kind of safety without wanting something back. And I didn't know how to stop expecting the invoice. I swallowed hard and forced myself to take a spoonful of soup. It was too hot. It burned my tongue. And I welcomed the pain, because it was simple. It didn't come with memories attached. My phone buzzed against the table. A message from Mia. He left? I didn't answer. The second message came quickly. Ivy. Don't do that thing where you lock your heart in a box and throw the key into the river. Not everyone is Gavin. My fingers tightened around the phone. Not everyone is Gavin. But Gavin had taught me the shape of betrayal so well that my body still flinched at kindness. I set the phone down. Outside the window, Paris glistened in post-rain light. The street stones shone. The air looked cold and clean. I stared at the doorway Victor had walked through, expecting him to come back any second because a part of me had already started believing he always would. 10 minutes. Then 15. My soup cooled. The bell didn't ring. And finally, I understood. Victor hadn't walked out to punish me. He'd walked out so he wouldn't say something he couldn't take back. The realization hurt more than anything else, because it meant he was careful with me, and careful was the one thing Gavin had never been. I paid the bill quietly, left the restaurant, and stepped into the damp Paris night. The cold hit my cheeks. The smell of wet stone mixed with roasted chestnuts and faint perfume drifting from somewhere far down the street. I walked without direction, the city swallowing me whole, until I found myself under a street lamp where the light looked like melted gold. That was where I saw him. Victor stood on the corner with his hands in his coat pockets, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. He wasn't pacing, he wasn't smoking. He was simply waiting, as if he had decided that even if I didn't know how to choose him yet, he'd still make sure I got home safe. My chest tightened. He turned his head when he heard my footsteps. Our eyes met. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I swallowed, and the words slipped out before I could stop them. I didn't mean to hurt you. Victor's gaze held mine, quiet and steady. I know, he said. That was all. No accusation, no demand for explanation. Just 3 words that made my throat close. I stared down at my hands. My fingers were red from the cold. I'm damaged, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Not in a poetic way. In a real way. I don't know how to accept something good without looking for the trap. Victor took a step closer. Close enough that I could smell him clean cologne. Something woody. Something calm that didn't try to overpower the air. I'm not offering you a trap, he said. I let out a shaky laugh. Everyone says that. Victor didn't flinch. He simply reached out and brushed his knuckles lightly against the back of my hand. A touch so gentle it felt like permission. Then don't accept me, he said. Not yet. I looked up, startled. His eyes were dark, but there was something open in them, something almost vulnerable. Accept my patience, he continued. Accept my respect. Accept that I'll give you space without disappearing. My heartbeat stumbled. I wanted to believe him so badly it scared me. Victor lifted his hand, hesitated, then slowly tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. He didn't lean in. He didn't claim my mouth. He didn't ask for anything. The restraint made my eyes burn. Come, he said quietly. I'll take you home. His studio was only a few blocks away, just as he'd said, but he didn't bring me there. He brought me to my hotel. The Maybach rolled through the wet streets like a shadow. Inside, the cabin was warm, silent, expensive, and strangely human. Victor kept both hands on the wheel, gaze forward. Not once did he glance at my lips, as if proving without words that he wasn't here to take advantage of my weakness. When the car stopped at the entrance, I didn't immediately move. The silence between us thickened. Victor waited. Finally, I whispered, "You don't have to be this careful." His voice came low. I do. I turned my head to look at him. His profile was sharp under the streetlights, but his eyes were softer than they had any right to be. I've wanted you for a long time, he said simply. My breath caught. He didn't rush after that admission. He didn't use it like a weapon. He just let it sit there between us like a truth that didn't need decorations. And because of that, he continued, I won't be the next man who teaches you that your yes can be taken when you're tired. My throat tightened. Victor. He finally turned to face me fully. I'm not asking you to promise me anything tonight, he said. But don't offer yourself up like a temporary shelter. Don't reduce what we've been to something disposable just because you're afraid. My fingers curled against my skirt. I could hear my own pulse, loud in the quiet cabin. I don't know how to be loved normally, I admitted. Victor's mouth curved faintly. Then we won't do it normally, he said. We'll do it slowly, correctly. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I nodded once small, shaky. Okay, I whispered. Victor didn't smile like he'd won. He only exhaled, as if he'd been holding his breath for years. He reached out, not to pull me close, but to squeeze my hand once firm, warm, grounding. Go inside, he said. Sleep. I hesitated. Will you be angry tomorrow? Victor's eyes lifted, steady again. No. I bit my lip. Will you still be here? He didn't answer with romance. He answered like a man making a decision. Yes. 2 days later, the invitation arrived. Not to my hotel. To Victor's studio. A thick cream envelope with a wax seal, my name written in elegant black ink. Anston, Paris, International, Jewelry Design, Competition. My stomach flipped. Anston wasn't just a competition. It was a gate. The kind that separated designers who were talented from designers who became history. Victor found me standing in front of the glass display case in his studio, staring at the old sketches inside like they were a mirror showing me who I'd been before I learned to shrink. He didn't interrupt. He simply set a folder on the table beside me. Inside were forms, dates, requirements, and a list of judges. Victor's name was there. So was a new name I hadn't expected. Serena Shaw Guest, Sponsor Representative. My fingers froze. Victor watched my expression. Calm, but attentive. She's attached her name to everything prestigious this year, he said quietly. Anston included. A bitter laugh slipped out of me before I could stop it. She collects titles the way some people collect handbags, I muttered. Victor's mouth twitched. Then his gaze sharpened. She also collects credit. The words landed like a warning. I looked up at him. What do you mean? Victor's eyes held mine. I got a call yesterday, he said. From a contact in Cloud City. My chest tightened instinctively. I didn't ask whose name, because I already knew. Victor slid another sheet across the table. A photo. A familiar teardrop diamond sketch. My 5-year anniversary set. The one I had deleted. The one Gavin had restored. Except now there was a new watermark on the corner. Cane Harbour. Group. Design Department. No name. No initials. No Ivy. My vision narrowed. They're pushing a limited engagement collection, Victor said. And the rumours say Serena is the creative lead. My fingers trembled as I held the photo. A sharp, cold rage rose in my stomach, clean and focused. Not heartbreak. Not grief. Something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Victor leaned closer, voice low. Enter Anston, he said. Not for revenge. For proof. I swallowed. What proof? Victor's eyes darkened. That your designs don't belong to their building, he said. They belong to you. My throat tightened. I stared down at the photo again. Gavin had always said I was replaceable, that without Cane Harbour, I was nothing. But the truth was, Cane Harbour had been built on my hands, on my nights awake, on my silence. I set the photo down carefully. Then I looked up at Victor. "I'll enter," I said. Victor's gaze held mine. "Steady." "Good," he replied. "Then we'll do this properly." My pulse kicked hard. "We," I repeated. Victor's mouth curved slightly, just enough to be dangerous. "I'm not your teacher," he said, "but I am your ally." He paused, then added, quieter, "And if you let me, I'll be the man who stands beside you while the world finally sees what you are." My breath hitched. Outside, Paris kept glowing, indifferent and beautiful. Inside, something in me that had been buried under 5 years of obedience cracked open. And for the first time since I left Gavin Cane behind, I didn't feel like a woman running away. I felt like a woman walking towards something that was mine. Back in Cloud City, in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and ego, Gavin Cane stared at his phone with bloodshot eyes, fingers white around the device. He'd been told not to drink. He'd drunk anyway. He'd been told to rest. He hadn't, because the only thing he could see over and over was that tiny signature, LTD. Ivy's handwriting, beside Victor Hale's mark. Gavin's jaw clenched until it hurt. And in that moment, the truth finally reached him, like a delayed wound. Ivy hadn't left to teach him a lesson. Ivy had left because she'd finally stopped belonging to him. And Gavin Cane, who had always believed he could buy anything that mattered, suddenly realized the one thing money couldn't retrieve: time. If you want, I can continue with the next scene as Ivy officially preparing her Anston piece in Victor's studio, while Serena arrives in Paris for the competition, and Gavin secretly flies in too, dragging the past straight into the same room. His shadow stretched long across the wooden floor, quiet, solitary, and stubbornly controlled. At the door, Victor paused for half a breath, as if something inside him wanted to turn back. But he didn't. He left anyway. I stayed frozen at the table for a long time, my chopsticks cooling in my hand like 2 pieces of useless metal. "Ma'am, would you like to settle the bill?" I blinked, coming back to myself, and turned toward the server. "The gentleman already paid," she said with a polite smile, rolling a small cart closer. "And he ordered this for you." On the tray sat a steaming bowl of lotus seed and red date dessert soup. "He said you barely ate," she added gently. "He asked that you finish it before you leave." I stared at the bowl. The rising heat blurred my vision. Even after walking out, he hadn't forgotten my stomach, or my mood, or the way I'd been sitting there trying to look strong while my insides were splitting. Victor Hale was always like that. And what about me? I had taken the most precious thing he'd quietly held for years and called it temporary. I had made a silent devotion sound like a cheap exchange. My hands shook as I lifted the bowl. The sweetness was mild, the texture soft, the warmth spread through my chest like a palm laid gently over bruised ribs. And in that exact moment, a thought sliced clean through me. If I had known it would end like this, I would never have been impulsive that night. Never would have stepped into his life just to scratch him with my fear. Late at night, Victor's design studio was lit by a single desk lamp. The world outside Paris was hushed, rainwater still clinging to the windows, moonlight pale and patient. Victor opened his safe. Inside, wrapped in black velvet, lay a silver necklace. The pendant was a small maple leaf, delicate, sharp-edged, catching the lamplight like a secret. One side held a moonstone, the other was black onyx, my graduation design. Victor remembered my presentation word for word. Light and shadow, I'd said. Gentleness and strength. Back then my eyes had been bright as winter stars, clear, stubborn, unwilling to be dimmed. 6 years ago, on an autumn afternoon, Victor had stepped into the university's old library for the first time. Sunlight slipped through ginkgo branches, flickering gold over long wooden tables and dusty spines. In the deepest corner, a girl sat bent over her sketchbook. So quiet she seemed to dissolve into the wall. He stood behind a bookshelf, watching. He watched her bite the end of her pencil, then suddenly her eyes lit up like she'd caught a spark of inspiration, and her wrist moved fast, fearless, as if the lines already existed in the air, and she only needed to trace them into life. In that instant, something in his chest had been pierced clean through. After that, she became his favorite student. Not just because she was talented, but because she was stubborn in the right way. When everyone chased market trends, she held onto her own voice with both hands. Like this silver maple leaf. A diamond would have made it easy to sparkle. But she chose moonstone and onyx. She even set the stones off-center, deliberately unbalanced, like she wanted the world to feel the tension between light and dark, instead of smoothing it away. Half a month ago, while consulting for a Paris workshop, Victor had glanced at a rush order for an emerald tie clip. Just one look and he recognized the cut. 45-degree angle, rounded edges, a flat face that still held depth. Her signature. It was unmistakable. But the buyer name printed on the order was Serena Shaw. Victor was not a man who interfered easily. Not a man who inserted himself where he didn't belong. Yet that time, he called in a favor quietly and asked someone with connections to the Shaw family what was happening. When he heard the word engagement tied to the Kane family, every scattered piece clicked into place. The reunion dinner in Paris had been arranged. The rest had been fate's cruel generosity. A turn of the head in a crowd, a glance across a room, and 5 years of waiting finally seemed to find an answer. And now it was all being pushed back to the starting line again. Victor set the maple leaf necklace back into the safe and lifted his gaze to the moon outside the window. Paris at night was quiet, just like the way I looked when I drew focused, absorbed, defenseless in my concentration. Every design Gavin Kane had dismissed too cold, too artistic, too hard to sell was here, protected in Victor's private collection. Moonstone, teardrop cuts, Eastern motifs, off-center symmetry. I had grown up, but I had also lost something sharp and pure along the way. Victor had never missed a single one of my new pieces over the years. He had watched my lines change, my stone choices shift, my boldness slowly replaced by caution. He saw it all, and he never said a word. Because he didn't have the right. All he could do was keep everything quietly locked in the deepest part of his life. I was like a wounded bird now, proud in daylight, trembling at night when someone held me. The girl who once dared to challenge diamonds with moonstone had been trapped inside a cage named growing up. Maybe a temporary relationship wasn't the worst thing. Victor didn't demand much. He only wanted to stand beside me openly, properly, without forcing me to bleed out my fear onto him. He wasn't in a hurry. Like this silver maple leaf, he could wait for the moonlight. 6 years already. Waiting longer wouldn't kill him. What do you mean you rejected Victor Hale? Mia's voice exploded through my phone, half shock, half fury. I held my coffee cup and stared at the dark swirl turning inside it. The bitter scent of roasted beans hung in the air. I don't want to love anyone right now, I said quietly. And instead, you offered to be what, some kind of bed buddy? Mia choked on her anger. Ivy, are you out of your mind? I'm just not ready. If you're not ready, then shut up and say nothing, she snapped. Who told you to stab him with words like that? Mia, you don't know how many years he— No, she cut in, voice dropping. You don't know. There was a pause. Then she inhaled. I'm sending you something. My phone chimed. A photo, blurry, clearly taken through a crack in an office door 5 years ago. In the photo, Victor sat at a desk in the university building, holding a necklace in his hand, staring down at the tiny pendant with a focus so intense it looked like devotion. Even through the noise in the image, I recognized it, instantly. My graduation pendant. The silver maple leaf moonstone on one side, black onyx on the other. I had never told anyone, but that pendant had a name cheap-sounding, embarrassingly honest, and the deepest secret of my youth. Unrequited love. 3,000 moonlit nights poured into my chest, glittering. On the day of my defense, I'd calmly described it as the contrast of light and shadow, gentleness and strength. And then I buried it in graduation files like sealing a coffin, as if closing a folder could close a heart. That day, Mia said softly now, I was going to run to tell you. But when I went back to the design department, I saw Gavin Kane holding a huge bouquet of roses downstairs. She paused. And he hugged you right there in the courtyard. Her sigh came through the line, heavy. I'm sorry, she murmured. This Paris dinner. Victor asked me to arrange it. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. So none of it had been coincidence. The Michelin dinner. The elevator kiss. The night in his studio. It had all been drawn along a line he'd thought about for a long time. And in the reunion he had carefully arranged. I had used the cruelest words to hurt him, turning years of quiet feeling into a temporary agreement. Ivy. Mia's voice was gentle as wind now, but every syllable weighed a ton. Have you ever considered— You might have chosen the wrong man from the start. I set my phone down and stared out at the Paris night. The city still glowed. Cars flowed like rivers of light down the boulevard. It looked exactly like the night years ago when I stood on the library rooftop, staring at a foreign skyline, full of hope. Back then, whenever I caught sight of Victor in the library, I'd lower my head and pretend to draw, too afraid to look at him too long, afraid he'd see what I hid in my eyes. I pressed my unrequited love into sketches, into moonstones, into every line I drew. Then Gavin Kane arrived like a gust of wind. He pulled me out of that silent longing with roses and promises, and an arrogant gaze that made me feel chosen. I mistook gratitude for love. I turned dependence into survival. And in that relationship, I gradually lost myself. Even my beloved moonstone, I stopped daring to use it. And now, I was about to repeat the same mistake again. The wrong person had never been me. I was just too afraid, so afraid I'd rather lock my heart in a cage than risk trusting love one more time. Enough. I had already lost to Gavin's cold calculations, lost to my own softness, but I refused to lose again to time. I grabbed my coat and ran out. At this hour, Victor would still be at the studio. The elevator took too long. I turned and sprinted down the emergency stairs. Fingers tight on the rail, heart hammering. I pushed through the door to the next landing and stopped. Victor was there, as if he had been coming up. We faced each other in the narrow stairwell. Yellow light spilling down, our shadows overlapping on the wall. He looked the same as the first day I saw him in the library, gentle, composed. Only now his eyes held deeper layers I couldn't name. Ivy, he said softly. I wanted to tell you. I accept. My heart clenched. Accept what? His gaze didn't flinch. Keeping things as they are, he said calmly, almost cruelly calm, like he was cutting his own skin to spare mine. If you need it, I can be the person you come to only when you're weak. My nose burned. I stepped toward him, one step at a time, afraid if I moved too fast he'd vanish. He stilled. I don't accept, I said. His breath caught. We start over, I said, lifting my head, not hiding anymore. From getting to know each other, not teacher and student, not old and new, just Ivy and Victor. Something shifted in his eyes. He was silent for a long moment. Then his mouth curved into a warm, quiet smile, the one I'd remembered for 6 years like a prayer. Ivy, he murmured, moving closer. Congratulations, he said. I froze. It was the sentence he never got to say 5 years ago. On the day I walked out of my graduation hall, holding someone else's flowers. His eyes held mine, clear and unwavering. I really like you, he said, each word carved into the air. May I court you? The stairwell was dim, but in his gaze I saw a deep lake, glittering with moonlight. So unrequited love had never been a solo performance. We just wasted years inside hesitation and fear. I nodded, small but sure. Yes. Victor wrapped his arms around me. And this time, I didn't retreat. We still had 5 years ahead of us, enough time to fill what we'd lost. Across the ocean, Gavin Kane slammed a pearl bracelet onto his desk, voice cold enough to cut skin. How can you not find a single complete file? His assistant held out a stack of reports, hands trembling. Mr. Kane, Miss Reed deleted everything thoroughly. Even the server backups are gone. The data was overwritten. The specialist said, useless. Gavin kicked the trash bin. Papers flew everywhere like frightened birds. All of her drawings, he snarled. Not one sheet missing. For 3 days, he tore through Kane Harbour's data vaults and hired a recovery team at a ridiculous price. The designs he once dismissed as hard to sell and too artistic now felt like knives turning back into him. Half a month later, a partial recovery arrived. Not just her work at Kane Harbour, but her university drafts too. The ones he'd glanced at once and forgotten. Moonstone, teardrop cuts, Eastern aesthetics, off-centre motifs. Each sketch was a different portrait of Ivy Reed, cool, refined, stubborn, nothing like the obedient version who'd stood beside him while he believed she'd never leave. He had never truly looked. Only now, looking again, did he finally see how much she had changed while shrinking herself for him. Mr. Kane. Hazel's shoe slid a photo across the desk, taken in Paris. In the photo, Ivy wore a champagne-coloured dress, her arm linked with a man's. She was smiling, eyes curved like a crescent moon, her face lit with a peace Gavin hadn't seen in years. Gavin's fingers trembled, his gaze locked onto the man's back, tall, broad-shouldered, bespoke suit, calm presence. Investigate, he said, voice like frost. Find out who he is. Then, with a single violent motion, he shoved the recovered sketches into the shredder. Paper fed into teeth. The sound was sickening, like he was tearing up his own heart to prove he still owned the pieces. How far can you run, Ivy? He texted her. I had your designs restored. Come back. Delivered. But the chat never showed typing. 2 days passed. His phone stayed silent. That wasn't like her. In his memory, Ivy never endured his coldness. One call, and even through sobs, she would answer. At least she'd send an emoji, something, anything. This time she left nothing, not even a period. At 3 a.m, he finally couldn't stand it. He called. The ringing stretched long, and his heart pounded with each tone. He remembered the folders she deleted. He remembered her calm back in the hallway, no tears, no pleading, no glance over her shoulder. She had been preparing to leave for a long time. He had just been arrogant enough to believe she never would. The call connected. "Sorry." A man's voice answered, gentle, slightly hoarse with sleep. "Ivy's still asleep." Gavin's grip crushed the phone. That nickname, Ivy said, like it belonged to someone else's mouth, stabbed straight into his chest. "Put her on," he hissed. On the other end, the man seemed to chuckle. "Mr. Kane, calling this early. Must be important." "I said put her on." Gavin's voice sharpened into a snarl. "Last night Ivy was exhausted," the man replied, half teasing, half deliberate. "Please be understanding." "What the hell are you?" Gavin finally roared. "It's only been a month, she's already in another man's bed." Silence. Then the man's voice dropped, each word heavy. "Mr. Kane, you don't have the right to insult her." "I don't have the right?" Gavin laughed coldly. "She was with me for 5 years. It ended between you two." The man cut in, not polite anymore. "And Mr. Kane, stop dreaming about another man's woman." Calm. Sharp. Then, click. The line went dead. Gavin stared at the dark screen. For the first time in 5 years, he tasted something he'd never allowed himself to feel. Fear. 2 syllables echoed in his head like a curse. "Ivy, Ivy, Ivy." His assistant burst in, panting. "Mr. Kane, we found him." Gavin's eyes lifted, bloodshot. "Speak." "The man with Miss Reed is Victor Hale." Gavin went still. "Victor Hale?" Even outside the industry, that name carried weight to the most celebrated contemporary jewelry designer. The man Gavin had guarded against in every negotiation. 2 years ago, the biggest project Gavin lost had been taken by this same man. "And Mr. Hale was Miss Reed's university professor," the assistant added, voice shaking slightly. Gavin's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes cracked, because now he understood. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't a fling. This was the past returning with interest. And for the first time, Gavin Kane realized he wasn't chasing a woman who belonged to him. He was racing a man who had been waiting for her long before Gavin ever arrived. "If you want, I can continue directly with Gavin flying to Paris and showing up at Victor's studio right as Ivy begins her Anston competition entry, so the confrontation hits at the worst possible moment. Keep digging." Gavin Kane's voice was ice clean, sharp, merciless. "Find out when they started." The moment the words left his mouth, an image flashed through his mind like a blade catching light. A moonstone pocket watch. The XO logo. And beside it, that tiny inscription, LTD. So that was it. So it started then. His jaw tightened until it ached. Bang! He swept the coffee table aside in a single violent motion. Papers exploded across the floor like startled birds. Hazel Zhu hesitated at the doorway, testing the edge of his mood. "Mr. Kane, are you planning to go to Paris?" The Anston design competition was about to begin. The media would be there. The jewelry world would be there. Gavin adjusted his shirt cuff with maddening calm, as if nothing in the room had just been destroyed. "As the main sponsor," he said evenly. "Of course I'm going." He conveniently swallowed the other truth. Ivy Reed was on the contestant list. And Serena Shaw came with him. "I'm competing this year too," she said brightly, looping her arm through his, as if the cameras were already pointed their way. Her custom gown hugged her waist like it had been designed to live under flashbulbs. Gavin didn't answer. He knew exactly whose hands had really shaped the designs carrying Serena's name. He had already traced Ivy's Paris address. And in the last 2 days, he'd gone there twice. Both times he stood on the street below like a thief of his own life, and couldn't force himself to walk inside. The first time, he saw her with his own eyes. Ivy stepped out with Victor Hale, white dress, hair tied low, Her fingers rose on tiptoe to straighten Victor's tie. Victor leaned down and murmured something into her ear, the corner of his mouth lifting. Ivy looked up and smiled. Her eyes curved like a crescent moon, soft, peaceful, unguarded. A smile Gavin had not earned in years. The second time, he stood under a street lamp for more than 2 hours, just watching the highest floor light turn off then turn on again. He saw Ivy on the balcony, leaning on the rail, staring into the distance. Silver moonlight brushed her cheek, and for one sickening moment, she overlapped with an old memory. A girl clutching blueprints beneath the dormitory streetlights. Only now, that moonlight no longer belonged to him. Back then, he'd found her clinginess unbearable. Now, if he wanted to see her once, he had to hide in the dark like a coward. On competition day, Gavin's palm was slick with sweat. He felt more tense than the contestants. Serena linked her arm through his as they entered the hall, perfect makeup, perfect smile, a walking headline. But Gavin's eyes kept hunting for another figure in the crowd. Professor Hale. Serena's voice suddenly tightened, as if the name tasted bitter. Gavin's head snapped up. Victor stood at a distance, elegant, calm, composed. Dark bespoke suit, a tie clip featuring a teardrop moonstone. The cut was unmistakable. It was the style Ivy used to love. Serena. Victor gave a slight nod, polite smile in place. So long, Serena said, her voice strained. Gavin paused. They knew each other. It was the first time he'd ever seen Serena look off balance. And this is... Victor's gaze shifted toward Gavin, calm, distant, the look you gave a stranger on the street. Kane, he said, as if confirming a rumour. Serena tightened her grip on Gavin's arm. This is Mr. Gavin Kane, CEO of Kane Harbour, she said with practiced brightness. And the main sponsor of this competition. Her chin lifted a fraction. And my fiancé. I heard the good news, Victor replied mildly. His tone was warm. His emotion was absent. Congratulations. Gavin felt Serena's fingers clamp down on him like a claim. A moment later, during scoring, Serena softened her voice, forcing a sweet smile. I hope you'll guide me a little, Professor. Sorry. Victor's mouth tipped, almost a smile, almost not. I've withdrawn from the judging panel. Serena blinked. Why? She stepped forward without meaning to. I don't want any misunderstandings, Victor said calmly. But there was something unmistakably proud beneath his calm. The person I'm pursuing is competing today. If I sat on the judging chair, I wouldn't be objective. The sentence hit Gavin's chest like a hammer. Victor's gaze slid past Gavin and Serena, softening towards someone behind them. Warmth surfaced clear, visible, undeniable. Ivy, come here. I heard him call and turned, and immediately met Gavin Kane's eyes. Perfect suit. Dark tie. Serena beside him in champagne satin. They looked like the cover of a business magazine. Power and beauty, tailored and expensive. I used to think seeing him again would crush the air out of my lungs, but my heartbeat stayed steady. No collapse, no choking pain like that hotel lobby years ago. Instead, the way Victor said my name, soft, intimate, made my ears burn, dragging back last night's whisper against my skin. Tomorrow I'll be right here. Long time no see, Mr. Kane, I said, smiling, calm and controlled. Gavin's gaze dropped to Victor's hand at my waist. Victor's fingers tightened, slightly quiet confirmation. Gavin's eyes darkened until they looked like bruises. I heard Miss Shaw's piece is outstanding this year, I continued, turning to Serena with the same polite smile. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Serena's face blanched a shade. Her eyes flicked between me and Victor like she couldn't decide which threat was worse. You two are? I'm courting Ivy, Victor answered smoothly. cutting in before Serena could form the rest. Gentle voice. Unshakable conviction. She gave me a chance. Then he dipped his head, looking at me like I was something rare. And your piece today. Gavin spoke over him. As if Victor didn't exist. His eyes locked on me, obsessive and raw. I heard your entry is special. It's not special, I replied evenly. Just a few stones that aren't worth much. Moonstone again? Serena's tone sharpened with mockery. I saw the pocket watch you gave the Kane family elder. Commercially, it wasn't worth much at all. Victor's voice cut through the air, calm, precise. Artistic value should never be measured by commerce. His words landed clean, each syllable distinct. A great design is always a mirror of the designer's soul. At the main exhibition area, Serena stood in front of a glass display case. Gowns sweeping the floor, flashbulbs popping, her smile locked into the angle photographers preferred. This necklace combines diamonds with ocean sapphire, she said, voice sweet. The centerpiece is cut with the latest 45-degree arc technique. Down in the audience, I let out a quiet laugh. It was the exact anniversary gift I'd given Gavin Kane last month. Original, identical, not one detail wrong. Miss Shaw, an older judge with gold-rimmed glasses, asked, "Where did the inspiration come from?" "I've always loved the sea," Serena answered smoothly. "Sapphire is like ocean water, pure and deep. But your previous designs lean toward onyx and emerald," another judge said, flipping through her file. "And this cutting technique hasn't appeared in your earlier work. Why such a dramatic change?" Serena's smile stiffened. Her eyes dipped instinctively toward the sponsor section, searching for Gavin like a lifeline. "This is a recent experiment of mine," she forced out. "An experiment?" The older judge raised an eyebrow. "But the execution is extremely mature. Not experimental at all. And this teardrop curvature is actually very similar to..." He flipped further, his gaze pausing on a particular page. I knew what he was looking at. My portfolio had been attached in the overall competition references. His eyes lifted, ready to say something. Then he stopped. Behind gold-rimmed lenses, his gaze drifted to Gavin Kane, then returned to Serena, loaded with meaning. He closed the file. "All right," he said mildly. "We understand. Thank you, Miss Shaw. Not a bad design. Not a bad design. Not a good one either." And everyone in the room understood what he was really saying. Then it was my turn. I stepped onto the stage and opened my velvet box. The hall lights poured down cold and bright, like a pale moon. "This is a pocket watch," I said into the microphone. My voice echoed into the hall that was noisy. Then gradually fell silent. My inspiration comes from the eternity of time and the meaning of waiting. On the large screen, the camera magnified every detail. Moonstone lining the inner face, shimmering. A quiet ring of obsidian on the outside, dark. Steady. One bright, one shadowed. Like two halves of a human heart, always walking together. I turned the lid gently. The moonstone caught the light and released a glow like mist in midnight air. "When the lunar disk moves," I said, pointing to the internal mechanism, "the obsidian ring shifts with it. Whether the moon is full or thin, the night sky remains holding, guarding." The judges leaned closer. "This concept is distinctive," an older judge said, nodding. "But the technique is extremely difficult. A tiny error would throw off the entire lunar cycle. Can it run normally?" I unclasped the smaller watch I'd been wearing at my wrist. "This is the complete version," I said. "I've worn it daily for 3 months." He took it, lifting it under the light. The hands moved steadily. The lunar disk inside changed phase with quiet precision. Light and shadow braided together like a story of nights no one knew I survived. "The back finishing is excellent," a technical judge murmured, flipping it, fingertips brushing the tiny gears. "To keep the lunar disc smooth and still maintain time accuracy, you'd have to calculate down to fractions of a millimeter. Impressive." "One last question," another judge said, opening my file. "What is the title of this piece?" I inhaled. "Cold Moon." A low ripple ran through the hall. In the sponsor section, Gavin's face darkened, his jaw locked. He knew where that name came from. "Why that title?" the judge asked kindly. "Because..." My voice softened, but I heard my heart answering inside it. "It's a metaphor for time. The moon becomes full, then wanes. It brightens, then fades. Only the cold night stays." I paused. Time passes, people leave. But some waiting. I lifted my eyes past the judges, past the lights toward the man standing quietly in the crowd, still watching me without blinking. Is forever. After the presentations, the gold prize was announced. Serena Shaw. She stood on stage holding the gilded trophy, smile perfectly curved for the cameras, but her eyelids trembled slightly under the heat of the spotlights. She knew. The judges had seen it. Everyone in the room had. But because the sponsor's face mattered, no one ripped the mask off in public. The trophy in her hands felt hot, like punishment dressed as glory. As the applause rose and fell, Serena's mind slid backward, to a sunlit art room years ago. Her father had hired the best tutor money could buy. Victor Hale pushed open the studio door, backlit by sunlight. Tall, slender, long fingers. A deep, warm voice. She remembered the way he leaned down, drawing a red line on her draft with a pen. "This angle, tighten it a little," he'd said softly. "The curve will feel more harmonious." Her heart had always raced around him. In that bright room, he felt like the piece of youth she could touch but never hold. She secretly sketched him by the window over and over until the page filled with the same lonely silhouette. In front of him, she played lively, confident, flirted in small jokes, but he kept the courteous distance of a teacher. She once planned a confession, even bought an expensive watch for his birthday. But that day, in the wallet he left behind in the art room, she found an old photo edges curled from being touched too many times. In the photo, a girl sat in the corner of a library, head lowered, drawing, long hair falling over her shoulder, window light touching the ridge of her nose and the line of her jaw, making a curve so beautiful it hurt. The girl wore nothing but a plain white shirt, no sparkle, no performance. Yet her presence was clear as autumn lake water. In that moment, Serena understood. All the tenderness Victor never gave anyone had already been poured into that photograph. When he looked at Serena's designs, his gaze was calm, precise, cool. But when his fingers turned that photo, his eyes held something Serena had never seen. Like moonlight sliding across water. That was the second her unrequited love turned into a joke no one watched. 4 years later, she saw the girl from that photo again, inside Cane Harbor. Elevator doors opened. There she was. Soft, clean, quiet. Head down over a draft, hair falling like silk. No one had to introduce her. Serena knew instantly. So this was why Victor had once told Serena her designs felt young and hasty. Ivy Reed. Later she learned Ivy had been with Gavin Kane for 5 years, and still had no title. Serena watched Ivy's designs in secret. Every piece was like Ivy herself, quiet, gentle, carrying a kind of light that couldn't be named. Ideas Gavin Kane dismissed as hard to sell were beautiful enough to make Serena's teeth ache with envy. Then Serena's father said the Kane family needed Shaw support. They wanted Serena married to Gavin Kane. A deal. Serena didn't refuse. She told herself this would be the best revenge. Take the man Ivy loved. Take Ivy's designs. Make Ivy taste the pain of being robbed. It was the only power Serena could hold in this arranged marriage. But she hadn't expected this ending. Her revenge had pushed Ivy back into Victor Hale's arms. Victor was still Victor. Only now, when he looked at Ivy, he didn't hide his tenderness anymore. Serena squeezed the gold trophy and smiled, self-mocking. She had lost everything. The man she loved for 6 years had finally waited long enough for his true moonlight, and her obsession was just a pointless joke inside her own life. Night fell thick. A luxury car slid through neon-lit Paris streets. Streetlight flickered across Serena's delicate profile, bright, then dark. "Gavin Kane," she said suddenly, voice soft. He didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the darkness outside the glass. They sat together like strangers sharing a vehicle by accident. "Do you know?" Serena smiled, no resentment, only exhaustion. "I used to think I understood sincerity. In that sunlit studio, I thought those years were the brightest youth I'd ever have." She watched her reflection in the window. "But today I finally understand. All unrequited things. Return to the starting line." She removed her engagement ring and placed it gently between them. The diamond caught the streetlight, scattering broken shards onto the car ceiling, like her teenage heart shattering onto cold stone. "We're both stuck," she said slowly. "The difference is," her gaze slid to Gavin, "you still have one last chance." Gavin's throat worked. "What are you saying?" "If you want to go back to her." Serena tilted her head. "Get out of the car now. I'll tell my father I chose to end the engagement. It won't be on you." The car filled with a silence so dense it felt like drowning. Paris night streamed past like a dream without an ending. They sat inches apart, and emotionally, oceans away. Back at Victor's place, he watched me spinning my silver trophy absent-mindedly on the table. "Not happy?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "No," I said. "After all, it was still my design." Victor's brow furrowed. "The judges told me Cold Moon is flawless both technically and conceptually." I knew what he meant. If Kane Harbour hadn't been the main sponsor, Serena's name wouldn't have been called. I lifted my eyes to him. "Actually," Victor stilled. "What?" "I spoke to the panel in advance," I said. "The gold piece will be auctioned for charity." "But I didn't want that." I took his hand, placed the pocket watch into his palm, then gently fastened it onto his wrist, like returning something to where it had always belonged. "It was meant for you," I said. The moonstone on his wrist caught the light at once, softening his long fingers and the lean strength in his forearm. The hands moved steadily. The lunar disk shifted silently. The obsidian ring held it like night holding moonlight without swallowing it. "Ivy," Victor said. I looked up and saw him pull a deep blue velvet box from his jacket pocket, small enough to fit in his palm, yet it felt heavy, as if it carried the whole sky. Victor lowered to one knee. His movement was elegant, like the way he used to bend over drafts, adjusting angles with calm patience. When the lid opened, the world seemed to stop for a breath. A ring. At its center, a platinum maple leaf. Veins etched with exquisite detail. Moonstone and black obsidian no longer lived on opposite sides. They met interlaced at the point of connection. Moonlight falling into the heart of night, not devoured, held. "I want to tell you," Victor said. Eyes deep as a Sen-side autumn night. Light and shadow were never enemies. They've always walked together, like you and me. My heart tightened. In that moment, I understood. He hadn't only kept my designs. He had listened to every unspoken part of me hidden inside them. He took everything I never dared to say out loud. and gave it a shape I couldn't deny. "Will you marry me?" he asked gently. No pressure, but a certainty that made refusal impossible. So we can write the rest of this story. Starting with this ring. I never imagined I would see Gavin Kane again like that. It was the last autumn rain in Paris. The sky had finally cracked open for sunlight after days of grey. Victor and I stepped out of a restaurant, my fingers still warm from the new ring on my hand. Champagne-coloured fabric moved at my knees. My head was light with happiness, my eyes still holding the shine of being chosen. Until I saw him. Gavin stood there. His grey suit was wrinkled, tie loosened, eyes bloodshot with sleeplessness. The man who used to look perfect down to the last crease now looked wrecked enough to scare me. "Ivy Reed," he said. His voice was hoarse, like it had been dragged out of his chest. Victor's hand tightened at my waist, pulling me slightly behind him. Protective, natural, unquestionable. "Come home," Gavin said, taking one step closer, eyes fixed on me like a starving man. I ended the engagement with the Shaw family. For the first time, the plea in his voice was naked, almost desperate. "Let's get married. Whatever you want, I'll give you. Your designs, your persistence, I'll support it all." For one flicker of a second, I was pulled back to that year-end gala 5 years ago. Gavin on the stage, high and untouchable. Me beneath the lights, holding my trembling drawings. And now, that same man was begging. "I had the best Swiss workshop make this ring," Gavin said, pulling out a dark velvet box, holding it like a relic. "You like teardrop cuts, don't you?" "I specially." Gavin Kane. I cut him off and raised my left hand. The maple leaf ring refracted sunlight soft, deep. Moonstone and obsidian leaning into each other, quietly shining. Gavin's gaze dropped to my finger. His pupils contracted. He recognized it. My graduation design. The one he once dismissed with a single sentence. Too artistic, not commercial enough. Victor Hale had turned it into a proposal. "It's too late," I said softly. But every word fell between us like a blade. I found someone who truly knows how to cherish moonlight. Gavin's arm fell. The velvet box slipped from his fingers and hit the stone pavement with a dull thud. The diamond ring inside rolled free, sparkling harshly under the sun. But in that moment, nothing about that sharp brilliance compared to the gentle glow on the moonstone at my hand. Victor guided me to the car, carefully smoothing a crease in my dress, as if even a wrinkle didn't deserve to touch me. In the rearview mirror, I saw Gavin slowly kneel to pick up the ring. Autumn drizzle began again, dotting his expensive suit with dark stains. I didn't turn back. The Seine caught the sunset, water glowing gold-orange. And in that light, I saw my old self standing in Kane Harbour's design room, hugging drafts that had been pushed aside, breathing so softly I was afraid to exist. Every suppressed idea, every denied belief, every cautious day was washed clean by this Paris rain. From now on, Gavin Kane would be like the thousands of faces passing on Paris streets. I didn't need to force myself to forget him. He simply no longer had the strength to move me. "Ivy." Victor's voice touched my ear gently. "Let's go home," he said. "Okay?" I turned to him, the window light reflected in his eyes, glittering like the moonstone on my ring. I used to think love meant compromise, enduring a little, shrinking a little, yielding a little so someone else could stay comfortable. But with Victor, I finally understood. Love should be mutual protection. No one should have to fold themselves smaller to fit inside someone else's world. Like cold moon, like the ring on my hand. Moonlight, walking with night, not swallowed, together forming a sky that is whole. People say vows are only wind, but this time, I chose to believe Victor. More precisely, I chose to believe myself, to believe that this time my heart would not be betrayed again.